Congressman?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Do you agree with your colleague that your committee has been tainted?
No, ma'am. What I want our committee to start doing is working, which is interviewing witnesses and accessing documents. And all of this politics, I'm sure, is interesting to the viewer. But if you want to find out those 4 tranches, those investigative tranches with respect to Russia, we need to start interviewing witnesses and accessing documents and let the politics kind of go away.
Isn't that the problem right there? I mean, as you've just spelled it out. Because of everything that's going on with Chairman Nunes, everything has been stalled this week. In fact, one of your Democratic colleagues, Jim Himes, says that you're in deep freeze mode. Doesn't that tell you that he needs to recuse himself?
Well, I'm smiling because I don't know when Congress not doing something for a week was deep freeze mode. That's not unusual up here that we would have a week where we didn't have a whole lot to show for it.
But you were scheduled. Hold on one second, Congressman. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you were scheduled to do interviews and to hold hearings. Sally Yates was supposed to appear, Jim Comey. But that, for whatever reason, Chairman Nunes indefinitely postponed it or canceled it. So what's going on?
Well, I think that for whatever reason, it's really important. You saw the hearing last Monday where almost 100 times the 2 witnesses said, I cannot answer in this forum. So why you would go back to a forum where the seminal witnesses can't answer the question is befuddling to me. I want to talk to Sally Yates. Sally Yates is an important fact witness. We're going to talk to Sally Yates. The fact that we didn't do it this Tuesday doesn't mean we're not going to do it next Tuesday.
But why didn't you do it this
Tuesday? We're about a week behind. We're about a week behind. But if we start next week, we can catch up.
I hear you, but you could have done it in a closed meeting. Why not do it this week?
I think it's important that we talk to Comey and Rogers again first. They really are, Allison, the 2 most important witnesses, at least with 3 of the 4 tranches. And when you answer 100 times, I can tell you, but I can't tell you in this forum, then why would you not bring back the 2 seminal witnesses to say, okay, we're in a different forum. Answer those almost 100 questions, and then we'll move to Clapper, and then we'll move to Brennan, and then we'll move to Ms. Yates.
Okay.
That is the natural chronology, and that's what I hope we do.
You make a great point. Why didn't it happen this week in a closed forum? It was scheduled, and then it was canceled.
Well, you mean Rogers and Comey. I think it's really important that we talk to them again. I'm not to their calendars. They came last Monday. Perhaps they could not come this week, but it is, in my judgment, indispensable that we talk to the 2 seminal witnesses again, see what questions they can ask. That's then going to lead to different questions for Ms. Yates and Brennan and Clapper. So there's always a natural chronology in an investigation. I like to go chronologically. I like to start with the seminal witnesses, and then they can identify other witnesses. I don't know what Director Comey and Admiral Rogers scheduled. They're 2 really important, busy guys. The fact that they could not come back-to-back weeks before Congress and spend 6 hours before us does not surprise me. But I expect them to come, and I expect them to come quickly.
And so Congressman, if Chairman Nunes shared sensitive information with the very source of the investigation, meaning the president and the White House, doesn't that compromise him?
Well, you're making an assumption that I don't make. Actually,
what do
you're making
you think
2
he
that
should? Well, I
don't
mean,
make.
look, let me be clear. We know he went to the White House and told the president something. And
right, and we have no idea it has anything to do with Russia. In fact, Devin has said it had absolutely nothing to do with Russia. So if the new rule is that the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee cannot share information with the commander-in-chief, we're in a whole new world, Allison. If that's the new rule, Devin says it had nothing to do with Russia. I have no reason to doubt him. So if it's got nothing to do with Russia, then no, the White House is not the target of the investigation.
Mm-hmm. Have you asked Chairman Nunes what he was doing, why he did this?
I have, and he reminded me of what I did in a former life, where I relied on sources. I had a federal witness killed that I relied on, and I'm not over-dramatizing this, but you do protect your sources. You do it in your line of work. Devin has to do it. They're blowers. There are other people who have relevant, authentic, credible information, and they want to share it. You protect your sources. Devin is protecting his. He's protecting it so much he's not even telling us who it is. But I would say this, Allison, shouldn't we be more interested in the authenticity and the reliability of the underlying information, whether it's the gardener or the cook or someone else? is secondarily important. The authenticity and reliability is what's most important to me of the underlying information.
Well, sure. And so what is I mean, that's what you're trying to get to the bottom of, right? Is what are the connections? Are there these ties between the Trump campaign, the Trump team, and Russia? So how are you getting to the bottom of that?
Two separate lines of inquiry. What Devin went to the White House about has nothing to do with Russia. So put that in a separate track. I was ready yesterday to start interviewing witnesses, all of them. I want to sit down with Adam Schiff and say, Adam, give me your list of witnesses. Let's do it together. Let's interview them together. We're both former federal prosecutors. Let's find the facts and the truth together. Give me your witness list. I'll give you mine. Let's start doing it in the forum that is most conducive with gathering the most amount of information. But, Allison, the trip to the White House that Devin took had nothing to do with Russia. So let's don't conflate the trip with the investigation.
Congressman Trey Gowdy, we appreciate your insight and you being here with all that information. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Carolina Republican Congressman Trey Gowdy. He was chairman of the House Select Committee on Benghazi, which first discovered that Clinton used a private email server. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing well. Congressman, explain why you are comfortable with Director Comey releasing word to Congress that there is this new wrinkle in the investigation involving Huma Abedin's emails before knowing if there's any there.
Well, I think there are two reasons. Number one, Allison, let's just concede being a police officer and a prosecutor is a lonely and tough job, and unusual facts make for some pretty tough conclusions. But he did tell Congress in July that the investigation had been completed, and he had determined that she didn't have specific intent to commit a crime. So I think he felt the need to supplement the record. Remember, John Koskinen is being investigated for potential impeachment for failing to supplement the record and update Congress. So I think, number one, you take him at his word that he wanted to supplement the record. But number two, let's assume, arguendo, that Secretary Clinton today were to say to a rally, all of this is in the rearview mirror. I've been investigated. All of my aides have been investigated. There's nothing here. Well, if Comey knows that there is potentially new information that may impact the investigation, then what she's saying is not true. So under the general theory that the public should be given the information, right, and then they can sort it out, my guess is he wanted us to know that there was new, potentially relevant information.
Right, before knowing if it is relevant. I mean, you've heard lots of legal experts say that it just breaks with protocol, him coming forward before knowing if there's relevant information.
Yeah, I wish I had a nickel for every time I asked the media not to report the facts of one of my murder trials on the morning of jury selection, and they did it anyway under a theory that the public has a right to know. I wish the president had not prejudged the investigation when he did so. I wish Loretta Lynch had not met with Bill Clinton on the tarmac. So I wish a lot of things had not happened in this case. Again, this is an unusual fact pattern which leads to unusual conclusions.
Okay, so in terms of the public's right to know, do you share that same measure about whether or not the FBI should talk about any investigation they have into Donald Trump's campaign's ties to Russia?
Well, as a general rule, the Bureau does not confirm or deny the existence of an investigation, although that rule lately has been honored more in its breach. So if you want the Bureau to update the public about an investigation into Mr. Trump, then they're also going to need to update the public about the Clinton Foundation investigation, if one exists. Remember, there's a referral on Secretary Clinton's perjury. There's an allegation that she committed perjury.
Yeah.
There was a referral letter sent by Chairman Goodlatte and Chaffetz. They have not updated Congress. I don't view his letter as an update on the facts of the investigation. I view it as a notice document. I want you to know my previous testimony has changed. The matter is still open. That's how I viewed the letter.
Well, one of your colleagues on the House Oversight Committee says that you and your Republican colleagues are basically just accepting this double standard, that you do want the update on Hillary Clinton's emails, but you're not pressing the FBI for any update that could be, of course, wildly relevant to the presidential race if Donald Trump's campaign had some sort of connection to Russia.
Well, I'm sure my colleague on oversight was not referring to me, because maybe I'm a universe of one. I don't want an update on the status of the email investigation. I'm not entitled to an update on the status of the email investigation. I used to work for the Department of Justice. They should not be discussing the facts of an investigation until the investigation is over. Now, if my colleague meant that Comey should have kept it a secret, that they had potentially hundreds of thousands of new emails, I just find that interesting. A couple of months ago, they thought Jim Comey was the second coming of Christ, and a couple of months later, now they think that he should be investigated for violation of the Hatch Act. I don't like relativism, whether it exists on my side of the aisle or their side of the aisle. I think the same rules ought to apply. This is a very difficult, unusual fact pattern. But, Allison, it is difficult and unusual because of decisions made by people not named Jim Comey. I mean, Secretary Clinton is the reason you and I are having this conversation, not Jim Comey.
So, Congressman, if Hillary Clinton were to win the race a week from now, should the American public and voters expect years and years of more investigations and committee hearings into things that you believe are wrongdoing?
It depends. Congress does not have jurisdiction, and frankly, we are terrible at investigating potential crimes. But the legislative branch does have an obligation to provide oversight, and part of that oversight, frankly, includes the Department of Justice. I mean, the Department of Justice is funded by Congress, so we should provide oversight after things have happened, just like we should provide oversight over the CIA and the State Department. But it's not our job to investigate potential criminality. We're bad at it, and even if we found evidence of a crime, there's nothing we can do about it. That's an executive branch function. So it kind of depends upon the nature of the investigation and what our motive and intent and purpose is.
Congressman Trey Gowdy of South Carolina. He's the chairman of the House Select Committee on Benghazi. Mr. Chairman, thanks very much for joining us. I want to get a question or two about Benghazi in there, but let's talk about the president's plans now to do away with the enormous deaths here in the United States. 30,000 people a year die from gun violence in the United States. Is there any part of the president's new strategy you would support?
Sure. And what I would advise the president, having spent 16 years prosecuting gun violence, is we need to do a much better job prosecuting current gun violators. Wolf, gun prosecutions are down over the past 10 years. If you look at the current background check denials, in 2012, the last numbers I saw were 80,000 background check denials. Out of those 80,000, there were less than 500 prosecutions. So before you ask for new weapons in the war on crime, it is fair for me to say, how are you doing with your current weapons? And there's a very small percentage of our fellow citizens who are criminally inclined, very small. So if you can put them in jail for a gun violation before they commit murder, before they commit a mass killing, why is that not a better strategy?
Well, are you suggesting, Mr. Chairman, that those 80,000 or so who were denied an opportunity because of their background checks to purchase a gun should be prosecuted?
Absolutely. It's against the law to lie in the application for a firearm. It is against the law to seek a firearm if you're under indictment. It is against the law to seek a firearm if you're a convicted felon. There are large categories of people who cannot possess or purchase firearms, and our prosecution levels are anemic and declining in those areas.
So when you ask the administration why they're not prosecuting these individuals, what's the answer you get?
Well, I have asked both Attorney General Holder and Attorney General Loretta Lynch, and I am biased towards prosecutors. I admit that up front. They tell me these cases lack jury appeal. Nobody gets that better than I do. I've stood in front of lots of juries and didn't have an appealing case. Murder is appealing to a jury, but your objective is to prevent the murder. So you have to prosecute them for that fundamental violation, whether it be a background check, whether it be a felon in possession, whether it be you've been court-martialed and you're in possession of a firearm. All those categories are prohibited persons. Wolf, you probably know this. If you're not in the country legally, you can't possess a firearm. If you've overstayed a visa, you can't possess a firearm. So what are you doing with the current laws before you tell me we need more of them?
Are you going to support the president's proposal for $500 million, $500 million to increase the issue of mental health, to make sure that people who don't have proper mental health can't go out there and buy a gun?
Well, I am supportive of the concept of people having access to mental health. You don't know this, Wolf, and there's no reason for you to know this, but I had a gun pulled on me outside of church a couple of years ago by a woman who was adjudicated unfit to stand trial. She was criminally irresponsible. So I have lived coming face to face with somebody who does not know the difference between right and wrong. So I support the notion of getting people access to mental health, but it's already against the law for anyone who's been adjudicated mentally ill or mentally deficient to access a firearm. So it would be fair, I think, for Anderson tonight to say, Mr. President, out of those people who currently are violating the law by accessing guns, what are your prosecution levels? Because I can tell you, Wolf, they are anemic for people who currently have been adjudicated mentally ill and cannot possess firearms, but yet have tried to do so.
Let me quickly get your thoughts on your investigation into what happened in Benghazi, Libya. All of us remember the 11 hours of testimony that Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary of State, provided in open session. You're now having these closed-door meetings with others who were involved. The former CIA Director General Petraeus testified yesterday. Leon Panetta, the former Defense Secretary, will testify tomorrow. Are you making any headway? Are you learning new information about what may have happened?
Yes, sir. We're actually doing an interview today with a witness named Charlene Lamb. We are up to our 66th witness interview, the overwhelming majority of which have never been talked to by any congressional committee before. And you're right, Secretary Clinton was in public, but it's the only one that's in public, and it's the only one that's going to be in public because the private transcribed interviews are so much more effective for gathering information than a public spectacle. So all the rest of them are going to be in private, and all the rest of them will be productive.
Trey Gowdy of South Carolina, he's the chairman of the House Select Committee on Benghazi. Mr. Chairman, thanks very much for joining us. We'll be anxious to get that report. When do you think that report's going to be ready, by the way?
Well, boy, if you could help me speed up the administration to get me documents, I'd be grateful to you, Wolf. I want to wrap up tomorrow, but I've got a dozen more witnesses, and I've got 3 departments